Hello and welcome everyone to the main event webinar series. I'm Meeta, Sahni, and I'm very pleased to be joined by JoEllen Grzyb of the Impact Factory this week. Hi, JoEllen.
Oh, it's lovely to be back, and particularly this is one of my favorite topics, anything to do with the brain and how it affects us.
Well, it's really good to have you back. And just for everyone who's logging on today, we've had a great sign up. So absolutely, the topic is very relevant. It's Mental Health Awareness Week next week. So we are actually dedicating all of our webinars this month to mental health. And JoEllen, you specifically chose today's topic, didn't you, for us to discuss further. Why don't you tell us about the topic and why you think it's important?
Right. So the people who are promoting Mental Health Awareness Week have chosen the topic of loneliness, and it's particularly apt right now as we hopefully are coming out of a pandemic, but we are still in one. There are still people isolating. There are still people grieving. There are still people adjusting or not adjusting. Yeah. And I think, and you and I agree, that it's relevant because it's very easy to kind of ignore the whole issue around loneliness and how it does affect our mental health. Yeah. It also, and I've said this before with you, that mental health isn't men in white coats putting you in a straitjacket. It's tiny things that just disrupt the flow of our lives. Yeah. And loneliness is one of those things that really can impact on people.
Yeah. And in particular, we've talked about isolation as well, because we're in the throes of a working world revolution with the work from home, hybrid approach to working. Companies are coming out with all sorts of policies and approaches. And actually, I made a comment to you that, I think some people are so hell-bent on staying and working from home. I'm someone that commuted for 25 years, 5 days a week. And when it came to me going back to work, even I felt this kind of like weight that was holding me back. And I think sometimes people have forgotten how good it is to be amongst others. So, not all policies work for the greater good of the individual's mental well-being, which then affects productivity and success of an organization as well.
Yes. Having said that, which I agree with, you can be lonely in a crowd. That's a cliche. And I think it's just because I love all the science around it. In last session, we talked about how the pandemic brain, what happens in the brain. Yes. The interesting thing around loneliness is that the brain has evolved through safety reasons to be in groups. Yeah. That is how it feels safe. It's hunter-gatherers, then farming, then everything that's happened is evolved to be in groups. So if you are isolated or feeling lonely, you don't have to be necessarily alone, but if you are feeling lonely, the brain, the amygdala of the brain, the poor little primitive brain, the lizard brain says, uh-oh, this is a threat. Yeah. Loneliness is a threat. So it begins to churn out stress hormones and creates inflammation, which then creates a lot of anxiety. But the other interesting byproduct or result is that it's a kind of apathy or a lethargy. So the very things that could perhaps help you combat some of the loneliness, you don't have the energy to do, you don't have the will, you don't have the resilience to kind of say, all right, I do need to pick up the phone, or I do need to just do 10 minutes of exercise, or take a walk, go get a coffee, anything that might shift things. So it's a vicious circle. Yeah. And that's when it can be hard to get out of.
Indeed. And so for our session today, I'll do a quick bit of housekeeping before we dive right in. As always, our webinars run for about 30 to 40 minutes. We know your time is really precious. We're not here to put you under more pressure. We're actually here to give you some insights and also some tips and tricks that you can take back to your organization straight away and put into place. So everything that JoEllen and I are going to be talking about today will be in a recording, which you'll get later on today. Therefore, if there are future events that you like the sound of but don't have the time to attend, sign up, and that means you'll get the recording at the end of the day as well. The other thing I want to mention is that we are an interactive webinar. We love talking, JoEllen and I. We get very passionate about our topics, but really this is for you. And if there's something on your mind or you have a specific question, then we have a chat box here. And as always, I try to show show our audience how easy it is to say hello or give us a comment. And there you have it. Hopefully you can all see my hello in the chat box there. So please feel free to jump in and talk away. Questions, comments, anything. And then we also have a poll, which again allows us to get the temperature of the room and allows us to ensure that we're covering topics that are going to be of value to you straight away. So our question today is around wellness programs in your organization and whether you have one in place. If you have it in place, is it fully implemented and utilized by your people? If you have it in place, but you know it needs work. And then the third option is no, but you know that you need to get one. And I was saying to JoEllen, shall we put one that says no and we're not going to get one? But I think we're very, very lucky to have an enlightened group of attendees always. And, you know, we learn so much from your comments and input as well. So please do share. And JoEllen, we as you said, you mentioned that this time last month, JoEllen and I do the first Thursday of every month together. And this time last month, JoEllen, we were talking about the pandemic brain and the fact that we've had physiological change in the brain because of what we've all been through as a nation, as a world, you know. But the isolation and loneliness that has come from that is probably only starting to manifest now, because we're in that state of flux again, aren't we? We were in that state of flux 2 years ago when we all had to sort of down tools and isolate ourselves at home, and it was that uncertainty. But there's a new state of flux now where we're all being asked to come out of our little cocoons.
Yes, it is an interesting thing. There was a very thorough article in the New York Times about loneliness, and they were saying that mental health practitioners define loneliness as the gap between the connectedness you want and the connectedness you have. Now, I question that, and I think you and I said, because I think a lot of people don't know what connectedness they want. Their expectations are all over the place. Yeah. And also, we sometimes look outside of ourselves to be rescued. And that's not going to shift loneliness.
No. And my example of that is when I was feeling, you know, like every bone in my body was saying, no, work from home, you're safe, you've got a rhythm, you know, the body loves to hold on to routine. God, when I got to the office and did a day's work, I literally was skipping on my way home thinking, oh, that was amazing. But until we put ourselves into new situations and just allow ourselves to reflect and ponder how that was, we're never actually going to have a change of perspective or a point of reference to work out what is good for us.
Yeah, I think that absolutely is true. One of the things is that and we've talked about this many times before, if you go back to the office expecting things to be how they were, you will be disappointed. And that will feed that sense of alienation. If you go in with a sense that this is a clean slate, it's new, it's not the same as it was, even if the desks are in the same place.
Yeah.
I mean, at Impact Factory, we had a saying, I mean, we've been saying for years and years and years, if you want to shift something, move the furniture, literally, figuratively, internally. And so when we began hiring new people, it was like we needed to shift the furniture, even though we'd been doing that over the pandemic because we were giving back rooms and things like that. There was something about this feels more open. This feels more communicative. This feels like the new Impact Factory or the shifted Impact Factory. And I think we forget that sometimes just doing that will help that connectedness.
And, you know, that's such a simple yet effective way of bringing about that. You talk about new. I think it's evolution, isn't it? There's no revolutions going on here, even though in the bigger picture, the way our 5 days a week at the office is no longer the norm. Individually, for organizations or teams, everyone's just trying to find their feet for themselves. And I think for managers, looking at their team and looking at their people, we have to remember one size does not fit all. You know, and I think that is something, whether you can put a little sticky note on your computer or somewhere, I think that is probably where management starts, which is that, yes, we know the outcomes, but the journey to that outcome is individual for each of your people. And that includes people's mental wellness and how we approach that.
And I think that, I mean, I would hope that it's easier in smaller businesses, but one of the things that we've talked about before, there was a really good book that came out in the late 50s, early 60s. We had to read it when I was in school, called The Organization Man. And it was around the paradigm about how business worked, the whole 9 to 5, not just the hours, the whole regimentation, the whole being there for the great God of your boss. And I think that when we do talk about evolution, we are, or should be, or could be evolving from that paradigm where, as you say, one size doesn't fit all. And if you have the expectation that the person next to you on one side will be just like the person there, and what they need and what they want and what's good for the business is actually, you got to get rid of that. You've got to actually say, that's not possible. We can't all be the same and need everything the same.
And actually, I think if we allow people to be authentic individuals while still acknowledging where they're brilliant at what they do, not geographically, but skills wise, also really thinking about, do they need to be in or out? Actually, what we found is for our team, sometimes having a day out and based from home actually gives them focus, time to do strategic things, and just allocate different duties to different days based on where they are. So actually there could be a benefit to having this hybrid world. But I think it's important for employers to also challenge a little bit without it being a rule. I think there has to be some encouragement to, for people to try different things and then reflect on it. Because I know that if I wasn't encouraging myself and us as a team encouraging each other, I think we would have had a lot more isolation and loneliness in our people, because naturally we are, creatures of groups. As you said, the brain wants safety in numbers, and, we like routine. And I think that's probably more of what's going on than people actually saying, no, I don't want to be around my work colleagues.
And it is an interesting thing about going back again to the one size fits all, is that it requires you to communicate with people. As a manager, it requires you to have the conversations that might feel difficult. And I jokingly say this, but actually it's not a joke. If anyone tells you they're fine, they're lying. They're lying, because fine doesn't tell you anything.
No.
You could say, I'm coping. It's been a bit challenging, but I do seem to be managing my workload. Gives you information. But if someone says I'm fine, which is a very common comment or response, how are you doing? I'm fine, which covers up the reality that they're not fine.
Yeah, I said it's like someone closing the door on the conversation and saying, no, I don't want you delving into this anymore. So that's where I think, it comes back to those open questions, or being more specific. How are you feeling today? How are, what's going on for you right now? Trying to find questions that can't be responded to with I'm fine. And making your one-on-ones with your people a human touch base and a work touch base. So JoEllen, I was saying to you earlier that I finally worked out what my approach to leadership is. I now call it holistic leadership, because, and I think for me, the pandemic allowed me to be a natural leader of the times, but I was that leader before, and maybe for some it felt too holistic, because I want to help my people with their careers. I want to help my people have that work-life balance so that they can spend time with their loved ones. And I want to help my people grow as individuals, whether that's, flexible working, condensed hours, a hobby, going on classes. We're building a wellness center for our people, not a physical one, but a group of experts all around, well-being, that our people might be able to access and get support from: therapy, advice, counseling, exercise, So I've realized that actually I can now put a name to my approach to leadership. And I think for all leaders at the moment, they've had to become that, which is not just how are you getting on, how is your workload, what's going on, but how are you?
Well, that we and I know we talked about this even in the first year of the pandemic, when I had a couple of webinars with you, which is that we've blurred, and I think it's a very healthy thing, we've blurred the boundaries between work and home, and that one of the things that people talked about a lot when there were webinars, or still run tasters, is people just want to talk about what was going on in their lives. To shut that down and say, nope, well, we're through that all now, we're back to doing work the way it should be done, actually cuts off a phenomenally rich vein of communication and information that you can build with as a manager. And also yourself. I mean, I was doing a little mini poll with some friends, and it was just, one of those things you do. So what are your top 5 relationships in your life?
Yeah.
And if you're not the top, something's wrong. And often people just leave themselves off.
Oh, yeah.
Because your relationship with yourself is what's going to help you return to work in a productive way, if it's physically doing that, or being emotionally intelligent. All of the things that actually help you cope and be resilient has to do with your relationship with you. And then you can identify the connectedness you want and the connectedness you have, because you genuinely know what you want.
Yeah. And it's interesting because we are speaking, essentially, I feel like I speak to an audience of either people leaders or business owners who are dealing with the challenge of supporting their people. But actually, leadership have to be able to take care of themselves first. It's like the oxygen mask on the plane. You put your mask on first so that you can look after your loved ones around you. So, before you check in with your people, make sure you check in with yourself, or get coaching and guidance and support for yourself, because, any counselor or advisor or therapist has to do and they give that time to people. They have to go and do their own therapy and counseling, where they reflect, and that's part of the law of giving people support.
Yes.
Not really that for managers, especially somebody who's at the top and there's nobody above them. So, don't be afraid to go out and get some support for yourself, because it will really enrich and give back to your organization and your people.
Yeah, sometimes I think that some leaders feel that they kind of have to come across as though they've fully formed out of the head of Zeus, and here I am, a god, as opposed to I'm as vulnerable and up and down as anyone else. Yeah. I think there's another thing, is that I remember this happened in a course I ran quite a few years ago, when it was a management course, said, but I'm not a trained therapist. You don't need to be a trained therapist. I didn't sign up for therapy to be therapist for my staff. And it's like, but you can be an empathetic listener.
Yes.
You can be a reflector. You can be then someone, as in your case, you can refer someone and say, well, this feels like maybe a little bit bigger than even you can handle. Here's some names of counselors, the therapists. But you are a caretaker as a manager.
Yeah, of course.
Otherwise, we are just going back to that regimented 9-to-5 corporate mentality.
Yeah. And I don't think there's any organization, well, unfortunately, there probably are a few, but in the main.
There are.
Yeah, in the main.
People within them.
Yeah. All the business leaders just don't want to change the outlook. But mainly, the majority of businesses, especially in London, where we do the majority of our work, are very forward thinking. I've got some stats here around mental health problems, and unfortunately, there are more than double the amount of women facing mental health problems in the workplace than men. So 20% of common mental health problems for full-time employees 20% are women and 10% are men. But on average, 15% of employees in the workplace are experiencing some form of mental health problem. I feel like that's huge. And 13% of all sick days relate to mental health conditions. Now,
yes, stress, because we think, mental health, it's like, again, being sectioned, being locked up. No, it's that stress has been overwhelming. You can't cope. Very similar. They didn't give statistics, but they did say that the majority of people who feel lonely as adults are women.
Yeah.
And that it's not that men cope better. They just don't feel as lonely for whatever reason. They have, women are juggling so much, and they feel more isolated, and they have felt more isolated through the pandemic because they've had to cope with, mostly they're the ones who've done the homeschooling. And also, one of the elements that, we've touched on before, but I think it's very easy to forget that a lot of people are suffering from grief. Friends have died, family members have died, and that can also affect our sense of aloneness, someone we were close to.
Well, for some, grief isn't just the physical loss of someone. It could be the loss of a job, the loss of a group of people that were your work friends. There's so many different reasons why people are grieving. So be gentle on yourself as well, and be gentle on your people to know that we're still going through this. And, JoEllen, I was saying to you that it felt like we were in a state of flux, and mental health became a real core topic right at the top of the agenda in the first few months of lockdown. And it feels that in the last few months, of course, this is Mental Health Awareness Week, so we're talking about it, but it definitely feels like it's being discussed more and more in the news. They talk a lot about high functioning anxiety, or people who are have high functioning depression, i.e. they come to work, you would never know.
Yeah.
And so employers will actually question, well, how then do we support these people? I think it's about having the right structure in place in your organization. And I have to say, where we're sitting on with the poll at the moment is really positive. We have 84% of our audience have a wellness program in place, and 16% say no, not yet, but we want to get one. However, of the 84% that have one in place, 2/3 say it needs work. Yeah. And this is the other thing. It's, I've been talking about our wellness program, and essentially I'm, collecting life coaches, business coaches, yoga teachers, personal trainers, because physical exercise and mental work go hand in hand. Looking at nutritionists, because the gut is actually, some say it's the first brain, some say it's the second brain, but the gut can impact your well-being immensely. And even a psychic and Reiki healer who is going to be my ambassador, because actually, so many are tapping into their spiritual side, and have probably quietened that voice for so long that now, where they've had the room to think about what layers make them up to be the whole, they're exploring. So why not make these specialists available to my people, whether we give it as incentives or as additional benefits, or if somebody thinks, I like that, I want more, that we supplement it, we subsidize it.
So interesting. As you were talking, I was getting in mind of a manager I know, relatively high up.
I'm listening. Sorry, my charger's fallen out. Go for it.
I was conjuring up a manager I knew, and I'm just listening to what he might say, which is, "Oh, I don't want all that ooey stuff in my company. People are here to work. We're not there to babysit. We're not there to, feed their egos." And I think that attitude may still be around. That is a little bit prevalent. That somehow we aren't spiritual beings, and we don't want that in the workplace.
Yeah. And I think that's people who are possibly a little bit afraid of...
It's fear.
Fear. Of the apologies. It was completely tangled up in my seat. I think it's the fear of the unknown. And I think probably took me a long time to actually acknowledge that it might be healthy for me to look at, what I'm putting in my body, how I'm talking to myself, what relationship I have with the collective universe. It doesn't have to be a religion, it doesn't have to be a certain movement. It's just understanding that, every human being on this planet creates an energy, and somehow that energy impacts other people around us. So
we want to kind of, again, go back into those separate boxes, that I don't talk about the things that matter to me outside of work, in work. And actually, which just, all it takes is one person to kind of start the ball rolling, and it can open up a huge thing. But I know that there are some people who are very stern. You're supposed to be here to work, and get quite cross if someone isn't performing the way they think they should be performing. And it's just not healthy, not anymore. I don't think it was never healthy, but now we you'll just get another big resignation.
I have an example. I have a fresh example of that, actually, which is a member of the team who joined us a couple of weeks ago. She temped for us many moons ago and is now on board as a consultant, and we're so pleased to have her with us. And I was doing my induction that I do over the first couple of weeks, and we were talking about the benefits and, again, that sort of triangle of self, career, and family, and how what we try to do is have our rewards and benefits reflect that. And that if anyone ever sees us working against it, please let us know, because that's not our intention. Sometimes we can lose our way, but it's not intentional. Sometimes it's just what's going on at the time. And she said, one comment, something I've noticed is that, between 4:30 and 5:30, 6 o'clock, we're in the office, because we have our team in between 2 and 4 days. So depending on seniority or type of work we're doing, everyone has their own hybrid approach. And she said, I didn't feel uncomfortable taking a call from the other half saying, where's the football boots for the sports club? Or where's, one of the kids calling and saying, where's this? And she said, I'd seen somebody else do it, and they didn't feel like they had to scupper off into the corner of the room. It was, a few minutes of a call. But actually, she said, the stress that I had in my previous job, because I didn't feel like I could do that, she said, I just feel like it's just all melted away. And such a little thing, which some organizations uphold this kind of, as you said, an expectation that we're all here to serve the greater God, which is the boss. And funny, you were talking about the 1950s and the book that you read at school. Was it at school?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was given at school.
If you watch Mad Men, they have this boss who is almost untouchable in a room, whereas now, mainly the bosses are on the floor with their people. Yeah. So things have changed, and we are holistic, I think, and employees want to be seen. As you said, yes. You can be in a crowd and be lonely. And if we see our people for their whole self, you get so much back. And I think, wellness programs or approaches to your team's well-being, if we're going to turn this into a practical how-to, which I always like to bring it back to, well, for anyone who's watching, what can you do? I think, as JoEllen, you said, it starts with the conversation, not the how you're doing. Yeah, I'm fine, and leave it at that. But have your one-to-ones, have them regularly. Even if you have nothing to talk about for work, say, well, why don't we have 5 minutes just to check in?
Yes.
And keep that regularly, and it is easy to do. Oh, can I change it? Can I move it? But actually, every time you move it, your employee feels a little bit less important, even if that's not intended. So try to keep your rhythm. If it's once in a blue moon, that's different. But if it's happening regularly, it will be felt. The other thing is, start with a check-in. Let's check in holistically. Let's check in on us as individuals and as human beings. And as I was saying, I was looking at some stats of other organizations, and there was a boss of Twitter. Let me have a look at my notes. I think it was the boss of Twitter or Airbnb, who actually would tweet about his counseling session that he just had to show his people that he is, in counseling and taking, care of himself, and, showing people that it's okay to get help. And, other organizations like Accenture, obviously a huge global brand, they've got an app which is all around choosing key wellness goals, but you don't need Accenture. You've got Calm, you've got Headspace, you've got Asana. There are so many apps that, probably less than £100 per person, which you could give to your people. And again, it's not that everyone will use every element of it, but what I love is that if I'm having a check-in with one of my team and they're having a challenge, because I have spent a lot of time in some of these apps, I'm like, well, try that, and have you tried that? And, it's just really nice to have something that you can recommend straight away. We don't have all the answers, but somebody out there will have more answers than you have. Like you said, it doesn't have to be that you as the boss has all the solutions, but it just means we facilitate people to get that help.
There's something else that I've talked about so often with you and in other arenas is acknowledgement. That one of the ways that you can help someone combat loneliness is to let them know that you see them, that you see their work, because acknowledgement isn't just, oh, Meeta, you did a great job with that report, and I was very impressed with it. But it seems that you are sad today, and you still were able to get this report out. Yeah. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Or giving people appreciation and helping them, or helping yourself and them be grateful. There is something about gratitude. I'm a great believer in gratitude. And my husband, and I won't use the swear word, but he says, silent gratification is fill in the blank.
Yeah.
You have to do that because it just makes people valued. And one of the things to me that combating loneliness is feeling valued. And, it's a very simple thing. And one of the studies that, again, the New York Times did, that people who identified as lonely, if they kind of were forced to do some volunteer work, a little bit of pro bono work, made them feel valued, made them feel less lonely. It didn't mean that they met their best friend ever, whatever they were doing, but they were out there, they were with people, even if it was on Zoom, they were doing something that was of value, and that helped that bridge.
I love that.
Not worth anything, because loneliness really can go, you can be in a whirl, a downward spiral of depression. Yeah. And again, I said apathy and lethargy. Yeah. So taking that first step is always the challenge, but that can be a manager's job as well.
Yeah. Or allocate, we've spoken in the past about getting mental health first aiders into the organization. And if that's something of interest, both JoEllen and I are available when you get the recording. Our contact details will be on there as well. You can follow us on LinkedIn, but we have access to mental health first aid trainers who can set somebody up in your organization to have that responsibility. Also, we used to have social committees. Why don't we have a wellness committee? If you're a bigger organization, it might be 5 or 7 people. If you're small, make it 2 or 3 people. Let them look at your wellness program, and let them see what they feel is now fit for purpose. Do employee engagement surveys. Do some, whether I do the pizza and drink, whether we do a lunch, we do a kickoff or something, but, do some very light touch check-ins with people of how are you doing, get people to discuss things in groups. We usually have a company summer day out. You can put a little exercise at the beginning of that. Every organization will have their own structure. Use that time to ask some questions, maybe get a wellness speaker in. Again, something we're doing is offering wellness programs, and with partners. We're not the experts on everything, but we, here at the Maine Group, we're very much about helping you attract and then retain and develop your people, because that's when you all get the best for each other and from each other. But if people don't have the headspace to dedicate to their work, as you said, JoEllen, you're going to get a resignation, and it's going to come out of the blue, and it's going to be a surprise. And nobody likes surprises in business, right? We like good ones, but the shocking ones, why didn't I see that coming? That's what we want to put in place, is that you always have a complete wide landscape of your people, the challenges. Let's put some solutions into place. Let's circle back and do some feedback loops on how that's working. And let's all remember that never are we the finished article. We're always revisiting and improving.
Yes, absolutely. I something you said earlier is that you try things out. It isn't the end all and be all. If it doesn't work, you'll try something differently within the workplace, in your own home. I think that we are so addicted sometimes to perfection that we don't want to have flaws. We don't want to make mistakes. We don't want to admit that we screwed up. And that, I think, also I know it affects our mental well-being. And if we can let go of some of that perfectionism, I think just people will be so much better. I mean, I used to be almost OCD we're talking like 40 years ago. And I look at myself then, and I look at the person I am now, and it's just like, I allow this, and that's okay. And it's just, come on, let's just live a life rather than having my life was very alphabetized, I have to tell you.
And when you take that pressure off yourself, again, like we were speaking about, our new employee that feels that stress level has dropped and they can put that energy into something more productive now. It's the same for people leaders and business leaders. When you realize that not all the answers are in you, but you can facilitate the answers through your people, then you realize that you're all on a journey together. And again, we will stumble, we will, failure is not the opposite of success, it's part of that journey. And so if we as a collective are going to work on our mental wellness, let's go on that journey together and create some little coaching sessions. What else? What do you think? What could we be doing? Okay, we've reviewed it and we're going to pick these 3 things for this month, and then we're going to reflect. I think I used to make that mistake, is that if we had ideas, I would feel bad and I'd maybe think it's political, or if I chose one and not the other. But actually, it's not. Pick 1 or 2 things. If you do them really well, they'll probably influence all the other ones that were suggested anyway. So I think don't be afraid. I think, with it being Mental Health Awareness Week next week, but we're dedicating this whole month, you as an organization, it's not too late to say, right, next week is Mental Health Awareness Week. We're going to give everyone 1 week's free trial to Headspace or Calm. Let us know your thoughts. If you like it, we'll invest in it, or whatever. There's so many ways. And also look, if you're giving your people private medical, there are so many free apps and trips to spas and so many things that you could be just reminding them. Did you know you can get this? Did you know you can get that? You don't even have to spend any money. I think it's just being really immersed and aware of
it's what you it's what you said, being a holistic leader, so that you're not just looking at the productivity, you're looking at the whole person and how that whole person fits into the organization. And that's brilliant. I admire it.
Well, I think some leaders don't realize that they can be that way and still be respected and valued. And I think the more authentic you are, you uphold your business's strategic objectives. You also uphold that you want I say to my people that we're on a train and we know our destination, but I also care about whether you want the window up or down on the way. So you better along the way, So, and every leader can bring some of that into their world. Now, we've got a couple of minutes, and I'm going to put a question to you that might take a bit longer. So I hope everyone is okay with us rounding up with this question. But one of the things that we said we'd cover was about isolation and productivity. And I wanted your thoughts, JoEllen, about if an employer has somebody who's at home and they don't want to come in because they're not comfortable with it anymore, but they're not doing as well as they might be. They might be doing okay, but they're not doing as well as they could be. I think one of the things that would really help them would be for an employer to help them change their perspective. What could an employer tell their employees about isolation and why it affects their productivity?
Well, I think first, there does have to be a conversation, and an honest one, and not you're bad because you're not producing what we expect, but I've noticed that your productivity has gone down. What do you think is going on? I don't want to make any assumptions about it. So why don't you tell me what might be going on for you? Is it stress? Is it something that's going on in your personal life? Is it that you're not feeling connected to the work or to your colleagues? So you can put out a little menu of what you think it might be, but be very clear that it is about accusation. It's the hunt for information. It's how do you get that from somebody so that they can go, I don't have to worry about being found out because I'm being seen. They can see that something isn't working well. And, I'm just shifting the files around on my desktop rather than actually getting down and writing a report or whatever it might be. So for me, it is being bold about saying, I've noticed that this is going on, and it seems to have been going on for the last 3 weeks. We really need to help. I want to help you get to the bottom of it.
And saying, let's get you in one day this week. Just try it one time and let's reflect on it and see what you make of that. Because I think for some people, it's just seeing their working world from a different perspective. Others have got used to liking the money and may be afraid to say to their employer, well, I don't want to spend the money on my travel. Or it may be that they are dropping and picking their children and couldn't imagine having a day when they didn't do that again. And actually, things can be flexible and without having too much impact.
Absolutely. All right, so change the working hours.
Yeah.
So if you come in for half a day, you've done the school run, you come in for half a day, you go home, you do some work there, you do the school run in the afternoon, you get the kids tea. There are ways, again, let's get away from the 9 to 5 paradigm and see how your people and you can make the whole environment work healthier. Yeah. It's the healthy side of things that we're talking about, not necessarily just the productivity.
Absolutely. So measuring outcomes over input.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, JoEllen, I can't believe, but we are 12:40 on the nose. I'm going to end the poll. Very interesting results. So 50% of our audience today say they do have a wellness program in place, but it needs work. 12% say, yep, fully implemented and utilized. And 37% say no, and we need to get one in place. So if you want to talk about that, I would love to help you design one. We are huge believers in the holistic approach to retaining and developing your employees. And tell you what, it's much more enjoyable as well. You get it right and you'll love your job even more. JoEllen, thank you. Any closing comments that you want to leave with us? Food for thought.
Well, my one always is that don't be alone in your feelings. They won't get better by you thinking the same thing over and over again. You'll slide down rather than actually build yourself up. So I really, really believe that let people know what's going on.
Yeah. And it's ingrained in our brain. This isn't us acting in a certain way. This is what part of the brain is it? The amygdala?
The amygdala. Reptile brain.
Yeah, our reptile brains are full in force. So be gentle on yourselves, and there's always a solution. And let's work together to get there. And thank you, Taylor. Taylor, you've given us some feedback. We really appreciate that. And thank you, everyone. You give up your time. We hope that it's been worth it. And the main event is here every Thursday at midday. And apologies for the noise. That's my dog scratching on the door. We'll also get some holistic approach later. Thank you all, and thank you so much, JoEllen. We'll see you again soon.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.